From the battlefield itself, we know the number of Hamas and Islamic Jihad terrorists that we've killed. We know we've killed at least 13,000.
From my experience, I can tell you that every problem can be solved. In order to solve a problem, you have to first identify what is the problem. Before I jump to the final conclusion, how to get rid of Hamas, how to eradicate Hamas, I have to tell you that there is another problem which have to be solved first. Of course, you may agree or disagree, but just wait and listen. The real problem is that thanks to biased media, mainstream media mostly, we don't have a real picture what the heck is going on in the world, especially what's going on in Israel, Palestine, in the Gaza Strip. So, do you know really what is going on? If you watch one media or another media, you would have confusing conclusions or no conclusion at all. You would just switch to another channel and say, hey, it's not my problem. Yes, it is also your problem and mine and everybody else's. It's a problem of whole humanity. Currently, we are witnessing massive murders of innocent civilians. Somebody would say everything started on 7th of October 2023. Yes, technically speaking, yes, I can agree to a certain extent, but also let's not forget how 7th October came in place. I can agree to a certain extent that 7th October was a final trigger, but we should not forget what events actually brought to 7th of October. In my previous videos, I indicated bits and pieces of this. Now I will be more straightforward. 7th October 2023 and Hamas attack outside Gaza on civilians and military bases took place when they realized that they are forgotten, when they realized they are no longer part of equation in very complicated Middle East international relations between Israel and neighboring countries. Before the Abraham Accords, which initiated Donald Trump, all neighbors of Israel insisted on solution of Palestinian issue and then to normalize their relations with the state of Israel. What happened to Oslo Accords? Those who watch mainstream media would say Islamic radicals among Palestinian people undermined the peace accord, but also there are alternative information which undeniably prove that current Prime Minister of Israel, Benjamin Netanyahu, did everything to undermine Oslo Accords. We remember his open and frank conversation with settlers in West Bank, where he said that Oslo Accords will be undermined, it will never come into place. They can relax on the West Bank, and one day from the river to the sea will be the state of Israel, only for Jewish people. He also mentioned that it's so easy to manipulate with the United States, and it is. The student protests, which are taking place at universities throughout the United States, actually prove how easy it is to manipulate with the majority of population in the United States, especially with politicians. But the core issue is why nobody has a real dialogue with the students. And are these protests real threats to Jewish people. If we look at the entire YouTube content, we can find one side, another side, middle side, whatever side. But if you have enough education and if you just apply common sense, you would feel what is real and what is propaganda. We witness that student protests have been attempted to serve as Israeli propaganda that would justify plausible genocide. The Israeli propaganda, I can say that faced a lot of issues. It's not only personal issues. So many spokespersons have been removed after being caught in lies, trying to sell some BS stories, which diligent journalists, professional journalists, immediately dismantled. They buried them. So Israel installed another spin doctors, which have a task to justify what they are doing in Gaza and also in the West Bank. Let's not forget that in the West Bank there is no Hamas. If they say Hamas is guilty for this and that, yes, they are guilty for many things, but they don't have power in West Bank. So I will show you quickly how it looks like when those spin doctors face, let's say, objective and professional journalists, and how that looks like when they are at shows more inclined to their cause.
And also to ensure that Gaza can never be a threat not only to Israel but to the civilized world as well. So those are our war aims.
You said, as you said, your government set 3 goals: destroy Hamas, return the hostages, and give the Israelis their sense of security back. But you've failed to deliver on all these promises. Why is that, do you think?
So I would challenge that wholeheartedly. Militarily, the particulars are quite interesting. We think there are 24 battalions of Hamas. We think we've destroyed at least 18 or 19 of those military battalions. There are still 4 in Rafa.
You claim that you've destroyed 18 Hamas battalions. What is the proof of that?
So the proof is from the battlefield itself. We know the number of Hamas and Islamic Jihad terrorists that we've killed. We know we've killed at least 13,000 terrorists, armed terrorists. I remind you again.
How do you know that you've killed 13,000 terrorists?
Because they were firing at us.
So did you do a head count?
Yes.
So this is a verifiable fact according to you?
I don't say that we have their lists, I don't say we have their names, but we have killed 13,000 combatants.
Yes, but it's just a number, Mr. Mensur. It's just a number. We have never seen any concrete proof that backs up this number.
So I'm a spokesman for this government. I'm a spokesman for this government and the Israeli people. And I'll tell you right now that we have killed 13,000 terrorists. We have executed the gold standard when it comes to firing and directing our war at the terrorists and getting civilians out of harm's way. We have no problem with the people of Gaza. We want them to have a better future, but we need to get rid of this genocidal, murderous organizations, and that is what we are doing.
Mm-hmm. You say you've set the gold standard. Your critics would say Israel is waging a genocidal war, according to UN experts. Israel finds itself in the docks in the International Criminal Court of Justice, which says there is plausible reason to believe genocide is being committed in Gaza. The EU says Israel is using starvation as a weapon against 2.2 million Gazans. It doesn't really sound like a gold standard.
So let me take those apart, because there's a lot in that question which you just asked. On genocide, I would point you to the fact that a genocide was committed against my people, indiscriminate killing against my people. You know, we, the Jewish people, we recognize evil when we see it. We've been very, very clear that it's a terrible war, it's a dangerous war. We've lost 606 of our soldiers in this war. But this country is united on its war aims, and we will be successful because, You know, we don't have anywhere else to go in this there is only one Jewish state in the entire world.
Explain to us why you're bent on moving into Rafah with your forces.
So the first things first on this question of Rafah, we move civilian out of harm's way. That's very, very important to us. In all of the battles which we fought, and they have been, it's an extremely complex military environment, extremely complex because it is an urban, it's not a regular battlefield, it is an urban environment where Hamas fire at us from hospitals, from schools, from mosques.
There are 1.4 million people in Rafah.
Well, we believe there are about 1 million, and I think our figures are probably
but that's a
more
lot
trustworthy.
still.
It is.
A lot of people, a military offensive.
We encourage them to go there, to get out of harm's way.
Exactly,
Right.
That's why they're there. But a military offensive into Rafah will end in a slaughter, the UN warns. Tell us, how are you going to evacuate all these people?
In the same way that we've done in the past.
That didn't work very well. You told people to move to what was a safe zone, then your forces would end up bombing that area. Are you going to follow the same formula?
So again, I think that's a misrepresentation of this war. We're after Hamas. We've got no problem with ordinary Gazans. I won't be sharing with you our battle plans. They're being discussed right now.
I'm not asking about the battle plan, Mr. Mansour.
So
I'm asking, how are you going to evacuate 1.4 million people out of Rafah?
We will do the same as we've done in other parts of this harsh military war. We move people out of harm's way. We've already acquired, there's been multiple reports of shelters which have been acquired, safe zones where people can move to.
We've also seen people with white flags in plain sight being shot by your forces. We've also seen people in so-called safe zones being bombed. So we've seen your forces kill people on the run from your bombs as well over the past 6 months.
So again, I would say to you that we feel we are the most humane army which has ever existed in living memory. We've done more to protect civilian lives. Where there have been, Yama, this is important. Let me share with you.
You even shot your own hostages.
Right.
That came
so
out
where
running
there have
alive,
been
waved flags, and your soldiers
an extremely terrible occurrence that was.
So how are people in
where
Gaza
we have
supposed to
made
feel
mistakes?
Safe? How are they supposed
where
to
we
feel
have
safe?
made mistakes, we investigate, we wait for those results, and we adjust our behavior accordingly. That's what democracies do.
Does Israel abide by international law?
Yes.
A UN Security Council resolution passed more than 4 weeks ago demanded a ceasefire. It demanded a stop to the war. Such a resolution is legally binding for all UN members, yet your forces continue to bomb Gaza. Isn't that a clear breach of international law?
So the Americans made clear that it wasn't legally binding, and with all the legal cases you can get a number of opinions, but they made sure that it wasn't legally binding.
Why doesn't Israel respect the UN Security Council resolution ordering you to cease fire? You know that the only way Israel managed to release around 100 hostages was through negotiations, which paved the way for a ceasefire back in December. Yet you are continuing the war. Why?
We're not dealing with Norway here. We're not dealing with Scandinavia. We're dealing with a genocidal, murderous organization. We would love to be able to settle all of our differences around the negotiating table, but again and again and again, Hamas keep walking away. And you know, this war could end this afternoon, before the sun goes down behind me. This war could end right now if Hamas did two things: laid down their arms and released our hostages.
More than 34,000 people have been killed in Gaza, according to the Palestinian Health Ministry. Your government rejects these figures. Why?
Would you take the figures of Al-Qaeda at face value?
But the UN and WHO says the figures from the Gaza Health Ministry, Hamas's health ministry, are reliable, that they even passed international scrutiny in previous wars. In fact, if you look up the numbers, in the wars in 2014 and 2021, Israel's and Hamas's casualty numbers were almost identical. Why would suddenly they lie in this current crisis and war?
The health ministry does not differentiate between a civilian combatant, which is a tragedy, we say that very, very clearly, and a terrorist. We do. We do.
The UN says these numbers coming from the Hamas Health Ministry are reliable. There's no reason to doubt them because several times this health ministry during this war has published long lists of names where you have the ID number, their names. Detailed lists have been published documenting who has been killed inside the Gaza Strip during this war. You claim you've killed 13,000 Hamas fighters, yet you haven't produced any lists whatsoever. No documentation. It's a number you're giving the world.
It's a number which our army has given to us in a democratic country with checks and balances, with media scrutiny, with all the Western values that Norway holds dear or should hold dear.
But Mr. Mensur, I ask you again, where is the concrete proof that you've killed 13,000 fighters? Okay, you claim it, but where is the proof? At least Hamas's health ministry has published lists confirming who has died several times.
I wouldn't take Hamas's word for anything, literally anything.
So we shouldn't believe Hamas, we shouldn't believe the UN, the World Health Organizations, all the aid groups on the ground, rights groups from all over the world. We shouldn't believe them, we should believe the Israeli government.
And I can tell you that Israeli Defense Force, Israeli government, they are making actually a huge mistake. They are not doing proper efforts to release hostages. They are not even making efficient effort to eradicate Hamas.
Rotten orchard.
Internationally, it's seen as Israel has a lot of trust issues. Israel claims, like you've said, 13,000 Hamas operatives have been killed. Hospitals have been used as Hamas controlling command bases. UN aid workers, UNRWA workers took part in terror attacks. Why should the world believe your side of the story when you keep pushing unfounded claims?
And how that looks like when they are at the journalists' shows more inclined to their cause.
Any civilian, but would you tell me that the Israeli soldiers that have killed today 140 Palestinian children and 105 Palestinian women are also terrorists?
I think that the Israeli people are entitled to defend themselves against what happened in the last 48 hours. I'm not for a moment defending everything. Tel Aviv by Lieutenant Colonel Peter Lerner, the British-Israeli spokesman for the Israeli Defence Forces. Colonel Lerner, thank you very much indeed for joining me. A lot of big developments in the last few days in the war, not least this latest potential truce deal. Can you just at the start just articulate exactly what that deal on the table currently looks like?
Piers, there are two ways to bring hostages home, either through negotiations or through operational action on the ground. Currently, the operations are taking the front seat, which is a good thing. Obviously, I can't go into specifics or the details, but we are doing everything in order to bring home hostages that are being held by Hamas for almost 7 months now. This is what we are obligated to do, and this is what the government is instructing us to do.
It's been reported that there might be a 40-day truce in return for the release of a significant number of hostages. Is that accurate?
Well, if we've learned anything from the previous hostage release in November, so at that time we held our fire for as long as it lasted. Unfortunately, Hamas chose after 7 days to resume action against us by firing more rockets at Israel rather than releasing more hostages. So the government will instruct us. They will give us their instructions of what they expect us to do. And of course, as any military would do, we will adhere to the instructions by the government.
If Hamas suddenly released every hostage that's still alive, and you were satisfied that that was the case, would that be the end of the war?
Piers, there are three known knowns about this war. First of all, 133 hostages need to be brought home. Secondly, Hamas has to go. They can't be trusted with the powers of government. And thirdly, we need a new security reality which improves the security situation for everybody in the region. So the short answer is no, Hamas have to go. They can't be trusted with the powers of government. With the powers of government, they built the terrorist army that came into Israel on the 7th of October. That's a reality we can't allow to ever happen again. And we're set out in order to do that. We have shifted our operations from a high-intensity conflict, high-intensity war, down to a low intensity, which is much more limited in its scope. We have a limited amount of forces on the ground. But as you rightly pointed out in the opening, we are preparing ourselves for operations in Rafa area. We know that there are hostages there. We know that Hamas's 4 battalions, 1 brigade remain fully intact there. And therefore, that is, if there is any way of implementing our goals of bringing home the hostages and ridding us of Hamas once and for all, the road to that goal goes through Rafah.
Prime Minister Netanyahu said that this invasion of Rafah will happen regardless of any truce talks with Hamas, which does beg the question, well, why should Hamas entertain any truce talks if it's going to make no difference to what Israel does in terms of invading Rafah? What's the incentive for them?
I'm responsible for the Israel Defense Forces. I speak on behalf of the IDF. And I would say our goal is to bring home the hostages. They can do it either through negotiations or through military operations. The choice is there. They could quite easily, at this moment, unconditionally surrender and let the hostages home. And then they would have to decide whether they continue to exist in the Gaza Strip as an organization, but they can't be trusted to govern Gaza. We've seen, we had a standoffish relationship over the course of the last 16 years with Hamas, where they were allowed to govern the Gaza Strip, and they built the tunnels, they built their weapon arsenal, they built the ability to infiltrate into Israel on the 7th of October. They financed it, funded it, and executed that action against us. So it just goes to prove that they can't be allowed to survive this war. They can't be allowed, and they can't be trusted.
But if they all surrendered, that would be sufficient for you?
If they unconditionally surrendered and released the hostages, then there would be definitely a new security reality on the ground. And that's something that needs to be determined in the aftermath of this war. How will the Gaza Strip be run? Israel doesn't want to run the Gaza Strip, but we know that it can't be run by Hamas or the likes of this terrorist organization. They abused the power of government. They didn't do anything for the benefit of the people of the Gaza Strip. They just basically abused it in order to build their terrorist capabilities.
Returning to Uncensored now, I'm joined by Med Hassan, the Editor-in-Chief and CEO of new media company, Zeteo News. Well, Mehdi, great to see you. You've been listening patiently to that interview with the Israeli spokesman, Colonel Peter Lerner. First of all, your response to it.
My response to it is that the Israelis are very clever when they put up people like Peter Lerner to speak for them.
I can agree to a certain extent.
Because he's a smart guy, he's eloquent. He, as you pointed out, strikes the right tone, somber, serious, says we're going to look into these allegations, we're going to punish soldiers who post these TikToks. We're a very humane army. We want to, look into our faults. The reality is he may be the spokesperson for the IDF, but he doesn't speak for the Israeli government. The Israeli government is filled with self-confessed fascists and racists who just this week, Piers, have been saying more genocidal stuff. Itamar Ben-Gvir said the other day, according to Israeli media, why can't we kill some more Palestinians? Why are we arresting so many of them? Bezalel Smotrich, the finance minister, said, I think yesterday, we need a total annihilation of Gaza. Those folks don't come on your show and say it so bluntly. They put Peter Lerner up to say, yes, we understand.
I think that's, listen, I think on that, you're absolutely right. I think Netanyahu's problem from the very start of all this is he packed his cabinet with right-wing headbangers who share very inflammatory views, which are all on the record, and that they have been forcing his every move. And he's done that because the only chance he has, in his eyes, of actually surviving in power is if he wins this war, as he would see it. I'm just not sure what victory really looks like for them.
I agree with you. He wants to prolong this war for his own personal and political reasons. Don't forget, Piers, it's not just a political situation for him staying in government, avoiding elections, leading a coalition. He's also trying to avoid legal troubles like Donald Trump. He's been indicted on multiple things. He was in the middle of a trial before he became prime minister. So all of this, dragging this out, is great for him. He also, Piers, don't forget, is counting down the days till a Trump presidency because they believe, the Israeli far right rightly believe, they'll get an even better deal than they got from Joe Biden with Donald J. Trump. So that is a fundamental problem. But, they're worried about ICC arrest warrants possibly coming out. We're hearing rumors about that. I'll believe that when I see it. But they should be worried, and he is going to drag this out as long as he can. And this is a guy who doesn't care
about the hostages. I just want to go back to the central point here. Peter Lerner began his interview with you, Piers, talking about the hostages. We just learned, I don't know if your viewers are aware of this, but the Israeli press has reported that the spokesman for the families of the hostages, the guy who just quit being spokesman for the past 6 months, Chaim Rubenstein, came out and said, hey, we were told there was a deal on the table on 8th or 9th of October to get the hostages back. Netanyahu blocked it. He says that the families believe that Netanyahu is the obstacle to a hostage deal. You didn't hear that from Colonel Lerner, of course.
No, I mean, I did see that report, and you know, I think that probably they didn't believe it.
So it's up to you to make judgments and just use common sense, simple logic. And finally, I will reveal big secret. How to eradicate Hamas. So, in my view, it's so simple. Of course, you may agree or disagree, but just wait and listen. I would use example how the Irish Republican Army, notorious IRA, also terrorist organization, was disarmed. It was a long process, but it took efforts and 2 agreements. First, it was Good Friday Agreement and then St. Andrews Agreement. And at the end, in 2005, the IRA was totally disarmed and they decided to fight for their cause exclusively through Sinn Féin, the political wing. So, no more violence. You wonder how that comes together with Hamas. Hamas is not reasonable. Well, maybe they are not reasonable, but I would say they are more desperate. Because who would not be desperate when you see huge military operation which kills so many innocent civilians, especially children? They are only strengthening Hamas by killing more civilians. Because if they kill, let's say, one Hamas combatant together with 20 civilians, including children, they will recruit at least 5 to 10 another desperate people who want to revenge. So this is wrong approach. I said on various occasions, you cannot fight terrorism by another terrorism. So it turns to be true. If Israeli people, citizens, remove the government of Netanyahu and elect, let's say, more moderate cabinet with prime minister, then solution can be achieved. If they stop killing and oppression over Palestinian people and they respect Oslo Accords and allow formation of two-state solution, which is mentioned in Oslo Accords, there would be no reason for Hamas. So that's probably the solution. I cannot guarantee it would work, but at least we should give a try. As I said, the most important is to understand the problem, what caused the problem, and then solution comes just like that.